Hello, it's Jenny at the Fashion Lab. Today we'll be taking our hand illustration and turning it into a digital piece of art. I'm going to jump over and show you. Today I will be using an illustration by the very talented Michelle Pike. She has given me permission to work with her work. You can never use someone else's work without their express permission. So I've got her work where she demonstrated for my lovely students. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to Illustrator. Close this one. Okay, so this is what we're going to aim from. So here is, over here, I'll just zoom in. We have the original work by Michelle Pike here. It's a lovely illustration which has a lot of spontaneity, movement and flourish, which is a beautiful thing. So we want to come over and create a digital version of it. But we don't want it to look like it's been done by a graphic designer and turned into a logo. We don't want it to be flat. We still want it to have lots of flourish and movement. So that's going to be our aim with this. So the first thing, I'm going to just create another artboard over here. So this will be new. Okay, so on this, sorry, that's a new layer, but I don't want a new layer as well, but we want a new artboard. So let me come up here, up to my windows and get our artboard. Here we go. So I'm going to get a new artboard and I'm going to show you the process how we do this. So the first thing what we want to do, and you could open a file, but what I think is actually always better is to place a file, because then you get into the habit of placing rather than opening, because you don't want to open a file and then something new, open a file and then something new. You always want to be placing, and that way it just goes directly into the file that you're working on. So we're going to go place, and I've got to come up to my my file where I'm going to find my illustration by Michelle, and we're going to click on this one and we're going to go place. Now with this, if I was to click on it, it would probably sorry, I accidentally clicked then. I'm going to place that again, sorry. I'm going to click on here. I needed to zoom out a little bit. So when I've got my cursor loaded, I could just click and let go and it will go to its size, but it's actually bigger than my artboard. So what I'm going to do is click, hold, drag to the other corner, and that way I know it's going to be to size. Then we're going to come over to our layers. With this artwork selected and this layer over here, I'm going to come up to, see how the layer is selected with this one in it? I'm going to come up to our menu and turn it into a template. By turning it into a template, it gets this symbol on it and it locks into place and it loses its opacity, reduces it down. So that means that what we're drawing in the foreground we're going to be able to see properly. So if I just turn this off for a moment. Once we have our template locked into place, and you can see up here, it's great. What we tend to then do is create another layer. And this one I'm going to create is going to be our outline of our illustration. And it just makes it easier if we do these different outlines. See, these are the two ones that we've added that are over here, and it starts to get complicated because we've got them down here. But if we do the outline, then later on we start adding the colour, we can keep them all separate and it just makes it a lot easier. So I'm going to do my outline. So on this, if I lock all the other layers, that means that when I'm drawing, it will automatically populate to this layer. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to zoom into her legs, and I'm going to come across and get my pencil tool, or just click in for pencil, and I am going to trace down her leg. And what I actually find when we're trying to create this kind of thing where we've got something that has a lot of movement, and we don't want to fill on it, where it's got a lot of movement, we don't want this line to go up and around. We don't need to fill it in. We're going to fill it in different ways. But once we've got that line, as you can see, it's very straight and boring. And then I might even just show you how, if I was and maybe zoom in and maybe that one there can come. Anyway, so these are the different lines, and then maybe come over here and I can, and at any time you can change it up a little bit. I'm just going to see if I can just round it off. Okay, now with all of this going on, that's that's fine. But can you see what happens when it's just a straight line? It does look too flat, a little bit too graphic designing. So what we want to do is we want to have these selected and we want to come over here to our stroke. If your strokes are not open, you can come up to your window and come down to stroke. But we've got our strokes. And if it's collapsed, that's the thing, these little triangles are drop down menus. We can click on them and expand it up and down. So we can expand it. And we actually want to come into profile. So this is a really good one to start with. You can change it up as you go, but I'm going to come here and choose this. And what we want to do with this is, it's a little bit hard to see this, but when you've got something like this, we can change this up to perhaps something like 3. You've also got the option of flipping it, and that will mean that the thick part will go to the other part of the line. And you see that works quite nicely. Over here I actually had this line finishing, which I think looked nicer. So where I've got it is I've got a cut in it here, and on this line here, which I'm just going to select, I'm going to get my pencil tool and I am going to add a little bit of a flurry there, and that looks better. And so with this I might even flip this, and this here down here I'm going to make 3, and I'm going to flip it so that it's the other way. Now when it comes to something like this line, I might want to go something like 2, because when we're looking at our overall illustration, we've got the shading happening on this side of the body without the shading on this side. So then it would make sense that if we're going to have slightly thicker lines, we're going to have them on this side of the body and the slightly lighter ones on the other side. So let's just draw her this other part of the other part of this. And now you could be using your pencil, and when you're using your pencil tool, if it is not holding what you've just used on your last stroke, you can come over to your appearance and up to the menu. These lines indicate menu, and it will have this selected. And if that's selected, then when I go to draw next time, it goes back to being plain, which I don't want. So you just make sure you come into your appearance panel. Once again, that is found up here in appearance. And you come to the menu and you deselect that. And now that will mean that next time when I start, now if you've got a lot of sweeping lines, you might want to be using the pen tool, but because this has got quite a free hand, I am tending to use my pencil tool on this particular illustration, whereas I tend to use my pen tool more often than any other tool. But in this particular case, and if they look wonky, just delete those anchor points, and then we're back in control. So you can see when I did that one, I lost my previous one. There we go. Now if I was to just show you, we go back up to our layers, and I was to turn off the eye on the previous one, you get an idea of how that's coming together with the different things. So once again, you see, I would say I would want that one to be a little bit lighter because it's on our light side. So maybe I'd make that 1.5. And this one here, where there's a room for it to be a little bit even chunkier again, just give it a little bit more. But see how now we've got this side looking definitely more dramatic than that, but we've still got all this personality happening. So this is what we're aiming for. Okay, I will continue on and draw around here. I'd like you to do that, and then I'll come back with the next stage, part 2.